Who does a fan-favorite character have to decapitate to get a drink around here? The Book of Boba Fett tells the story of how the son of Jango survived that nasty encounter with a giant hole in the ground, and it sets up some of the conflict Boba's gonna face as a rookie crime boss. Directed by Robert Rodriguez, the premiere episode of Disney Plus' latest Mandalorian-focused adventure fills in the blanks of the Boba Fett canon legend, and will break all of that down, plus all the Easter eggs we spotted along the way. But before we get into all that, I have to warn you, we are gonna spoil everything about this episode, so if you haven't seen it yet, or don't care what we think, now would be the time to use that trusty jetpack of yours and, oh yeah. Alright, now that we're past the spoiler warning, let's get to the good stuff. Okay, yes, Boba Fett survived the Sarlacc by basically fighting his way out, just like we all imagined he did. Jawas steal his armor and leave him for dead, but it's the Tusken Raiders who save Boba Fett's life by taking him in and showing him some of that good old-fashioned Tusken hospitality. Actually, they're also very interested in leaving him for dead, either that or just allowing their children to straight up beat him to death. But anyway, Boba Fett eventually proves himself a true master of the Terras Kasi by performing a wicked fatality on Tatooine's answer to Goro, and the Tuskens are eventually all like, okay, you're cool. Alright, I know that's a lot, so let me recap to show how that all worked out. So there's two timelines going on so far in this show. There's the current stuff, which picks up right where we left off with Boba Fett at the end of Mandalorian Season 2. He's taking over Jabba the Hutt's criminal empire after liberating it from the grubby little hands of one Bib Fortuna. Diwanawanga indeed. We'll talk about the current timeline stuff in a minute, so hang out with us for that, because most of what goes down in this episode actually happens in flashback. I mean, come on, it's the tale of how Boba Fett got out of the Sarlacc in the first place and got his mojo back, and we've been waiting since the expanded universe got cancelled to figure out how that happened.
In his belly you will find a new definition of pain and suffering, as you are slowly digested over 1,000 years.
3PO broke it all down for us back in Return of the Jedi. While the Sarlacc at the Pit of Carkoon is a fearsome beast with a voracious appetite, it does actually take a while to digest stuff. When the flashback shows us Boba Fett snap awake in the belly of the beast, he's in a bad way, but not in such terrible shape he can't make his way over to a dead stormtrooper, steal a head of oxygen, and then flamethrower his way out. Where did that stormtrooper come from, by the way? Well, stormtroopers were combing Tatooine for escaped droids some years earlier, and there was that barbecue at the Lars homestead, so who knows, maybe one of those guys wandered off and took a spill into a carnivorous pit in the ground. Anyway, I digress. When Boba Fett claws his way out of the sand, it does appear that he may have even killed the Sarlacc on his way out. Impossible, you might say.
There's always a bigger fish.
Keep your pants on, Qui-Gon. It appears in this case the bigger fish was Boba Fett. A metaphorical fish, if you will. Fans of the now apocryphal Star Wars Legends, aka the expanded universe, know that Boba Fett famously escaped the Sarlacc not once, but twice, and the accounts we had of this event actually mirror what we now know really happened. Boba Fett used his wits and his trusty Mandalorian gear to survive and escape the Sarlacc's belly. But of course, escaping the Sarlacc was just step one. Once he got out, Boba Fett had to survive the harsh and hostile environment of the Dune Sea, a tall order for anyone without some outside help, and wouldn't you know it, look who shows up to lend a helping hand. Well, actually the Jawas were less interested in being good Samaritans than they were with straight up jacking his Beskar. After stealing everything of value, the Jawas leave Boba Fett for dead. This of course lines up with what we know about what happened to Boba Fett's armor after it was recovered by those thieving Jawas. Star Wars Aftermath, a novel set just after Return of the Jedi, references the armor and Cobb Vanth, the desert dweller who eventually took temporary ownership of the Fett armor, as depicted in The Mandalorian Season 2. And speaking of which, the Tusken Raiders were a pretty big focus of The Mandalorian Season 2's premiere episode, and once again, they're a pretty big focus here. They find a de-armored Boba in the middle of the desert and drag him back to their camp along with a pretty unlucky Rodian NPC. And even though the Tuskens have appeared a bit more regularly in this era of Star Wars Disney Plus content, they are still a pretty mysterious people. It's not super clear why they bothered bringing Boba and the Rodian back to camp, other than to illustrate just how much Shmi Skywalker went through before she died. After getting treated like a piñata by the Tusken younglings, and then getting his ass handed to him properly by an adult Tusken Raider with a full-on gaffy stick, one of the youngsters takes Boba and the Rodian out into the desert to dig for those little water gourd things we saw them drinking out of with Cobb Vanth in The Mandalorian.
You drink it.
It stinks.
Rude. Anyway, the Rodian eventually digs up this thing. This very Ray Harryhausen meets Goro from Mortal Kombat looking monster bursts out of the sand and eventually kills the Rodian before Boba Fett uses his own chain to take it down, just like Leia did to Jabba the Hutt. And just like that, Boba Fett seems to have earned the respect of the Tusken Raiders, or maybe their gratitude for protecting the youngling, but either way, he finally gets his drink. Okay, so all of that happened in the show's past. It's hard to say exactly how long he was in the Sarlacc's belly, but it's safe to assume that those flashbacks are closer to the events of Return of the Jedi than when The Mandalorian takes place. Meanwhile, back on that end of the timeline, Boba Fett is trying to pick up where Bib Fortuna left off, which means accepting tributes from the locals of Mos Espa, the sprawling Tatooine city we've seen in the trailer. Tributes, by the way, just means bribes and protection money paid up front, not like a Tenacious D song or Katniss Everdeen. We previously visited Mos Espa in The Phantom Menace. It's where Anakin Skywalker's Boonta Eve pod race starts. Perhaps it's not quite as much of a wretched hive of scum and villainy as, say, Mos Eisley, but actually I take it back. There's a lot of scum and villainy going on in Mos Espa. Tatooine's just not a great place. So Boba Fett and his literal ride or die Fennec Shand are accepting tributes from Mos Espa locals, and an emissary from the city's mayor basically tries to shake Boba Fett down for protection money. When Boba Fett refuses, the Twi'lek emissary delivers possibly the most cordially worded threat ever before leaving. Boba and Fennec enlist two of the Gamorrean guards who work for Jabba, and they sign up almost immediately, probably sick of watching their siblings fed to rancors and getting force-choked for just doing their jobs. Anyway, the four of them head out to meet Garsa Fwip, which is Jennifer Beals' Twi'lek character, who runs an upscale cantina for what looks like a fairly fancy clientele, a considerably classier joint compared to Chal Mun's cantina over in Mos Eisley. Boba proceeds to set up your basic protection racket. Nice business you have here, it'd be a shame if something were to happen to it, that kind of thing. And it seems like Garsa Fwip gets it. She has her servants clean Boba and Fennec's helmets, which are returned full of New Republic credits, which is cool, but now they can't wear their helmets, they have to carry them around like they're playing slot machines at a casino. Real quick, it's worth mentioning that Boba Fett is obviously a very different kind of Mandalorian than Din Djarin or Bo-Katan Kryze. While those two bicker over whether or not real Mandalorians should remove their helmets, this guy is just worried about getting paid. But as soon as Boba and Fennec leave Garsa Fwip's joint, they find themselves smack dab in the middle of your standard parkour ninja ambush situation. Fennec gives chase and is even able to capture one of them for questioning, but Boba Fett has to be rushed to a bacta-tank after mixing it up with them in the street, so it's a good thing he hired those Gamorreans. It's pretty likely the parkour ninjas are working for the mayor of Mos Espa, the same guy the cordial Twi'lek threatener works for. Now, who is the mayor of Mos Espa? Odds are very strong that it's this fancy-looking Ithorian from the trailers. He's introduced like this.
His Excellency, Mob Shays, mayor of Mos Espa and its surrounding plateaus.
Beyond that, we don't know much about him other than that he employs parkour ninjas and very polite messengers, and he believes himself to be powerful enough to demand protection money from a guy like Boba Fett. The other important detail here is that Boba Fett has not fully healed from his time in the Sarlacc's belly. He opens the episode in a bacta-tank, and the exertion of the parkour ninja street fight forces him back in there at the end of the episode. He's clearly still recovering and far from 100%, which is not where you want to be as you attempt to take over a languishing criminal empire. And with that, it's time for the Easter eggs. And this episode didn't seem to be as jam-packed with them as we were expecting it might be, but here's what we caught just the same. The charred remains of Jabba the Hutt's sail barge, the Katana, surrounds the Sarlacc at the Pit of Carkoon as Boba Fett crawls out. The barge was once a monument to Jabba's power and opulence before Luke Skywalker's absolutely bonkers plan to save Han Solo ended with a bang. When the Tusken Raiders drag Boba Fett through the Dune Sea, they travel in single file to hide their numbers, something that old Ben Kenobi mentioned to Luke Skywalker about them in A New Hope. Garsa Fwip's cantina employs some top-notch entertainers. That's Max Rebo and a Biff musician playing an upbeat flamenco variation of that old jizz classic The Cantina song. I'm really glad to see that Max survived the sail barge explosion and found work, but where are his bandmates? I'm talking about Cy Snoodles, Droopy McCool, Joe Yowza, Dota Bodonda Waito. Oh, they probably died, huh? This episode also had some cool cameos. Boba hasn't gotten himself a proper protocol droid yet. Look, he's working with what he's got, which is 8D8, who appeared in Return of the Jedi as the droid who coordinated torture of other droids, which A, is horrible, and B, doesn't make a ton of sense, but I guess Jabba's notoriously cruel, and you can't really feed droids to a Rancor because it would be a choking hazard, and then you're just being cruel to the Rancor. Anyway, here he's voiced by Matt Berry from What We Do in the Shadows. Some of the droids seem to be played by actual droids, and you can spot a herd of Boston Dynamics robots walking through Mos Espa, which is a little immersion breaking, but we'll allow it. That super cordial majordomo from Mos Espa's mayor? That's David Pesquisi from Veep. Robert Rodriguez himself cameos as Doc Strassi, the Trandoshan from the beginning of the episode who offers Boba Fett a tribute that also sounded strangely like a threat. And yeah, I think that's it. That's it, right? That's all we got for Easter eggs?
Yep.
Thanks, kid. What did you all think of the Book of Boba Fett premiere? Did Boba Fett's Sarlacc survival live up to your headcanon, or were you hoping he'd wind up communicating with the Sarlacc's hive mind through one of its other half-digested victims? Let's hear your best theories in the comments below. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode of Canon Fodder. For more Star Wars, here's everything Star Wars has coming in 2022, and don't forget to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch. We'll see you next time. May the Force be with you.